So I will need to maybe do it a little bit slower in times and stuff like that. But I'm really interested and excited to be here. So thank you for inviting me, and I will now talk about the presentation. Wild IoT Tales from hacking power grids into hacking oil pipelines. So a little bit about me. My name is Barak Sternberg. I'm a founder at Wild Pointer. I'm also an hacker in residence and advisor at Wild Ventures. I was previously an author at Sentinel One Labs and a speaker at DEF Connectivity and many other conferences. I did my master's in algorithms and computer science, and I love doing research from IoT, Linux, web apps, whatever you name it, algorithms, analyzing malware, and much, much more. I'm also a DJ and a party lover, so make sure you check out also my Mixcloud. And with that in mind, let's start. So IoT attacks are anywhere, like really, really anywhere. So the IoT malware landscape has been increased by 123% in healthcare over the last year, and SCADA systems are under attack, industrial systems, hospitals, really, really anywhere. So why attackers are targeting and focus so much heavily on IoT and critical infrastructures? So first, critical systems are tend to make more damage because, well, they are critical. And in that sense, if you can do as an attacker more damage, maybe the probability for the payouts, for the ransomware payouts and stuff like that will be increasing. So because the defenders want to protect their systems as immediate as they can to remove the attacks itself. So the more damage can be incurred and the probability for the payouts will be probably higher. That's why one option they try to attack them. It's harder to detect and protect this kind of system because it's harder to really inspect inside what is really happening behind the scene. It can give initial access to organization like VPN servers, routers, etc., and the scale. So many devices have almost the same configuration in this IoT landscape. And they have been used extensively for deploying ransomware, DDoS attack, theft of source code, technological source code, and much more, crypto mining, and even disabling and damaging critical infrastructure, nation state, not even nation state, and much more. Infection attempts over the first half of 2021 was over 1 billion. Last year, hundreds of CVEs, many industries are impacted and targeted. So with that in mind, let's go into our first story. So our first story is going to deal with the Russian-Ukraine cyber war. We're going to explore the power grids were under attack and the Sandworm APT threat actors. So let's recall the Russia attack on Ukraine, the cyber attack on 2022, the start of this year. So they were targeting banks, mostly banks and government entities, internet satellites, and energy providers. Actually, every kind of critical infrastructure you can name probably would have been there, including high voltage critical substations and much more. What was targeted is actually they were trying, well, in a sense, in retrospective, we can say they were trying to disable electricity. They were trying and actually succeeding disable satellite internet connectivity. They were damaging and wiping out critical infrastructure data to make recovery of those critical infrastructures way slower. So they're trying to do as much damage as they can to make the whole war efforts much slower, to make the whole efforts into defender efforts to the Ukrainian efforts much slower in some sense. And how they try to do it. So, So they're trying to using Destroyer 2, which we will deal and focus here after. They were trying to do a couple of wipers, malwares, many versions of wiper malwares. They were targeting multiple and various OSs, not just Windows machines, also Linux, Solaris, and much more. and they were disabling also services and ingoing and outgoing communications to make the recovery even slower. So with that in mind, a little bit of context about this APT group. So this astonishing APT group is a part, assumed to be a part of the GRU, which is a part of the Russian kind of government intelligence corps, and it's soon to be this unit 74455, and it had assumed to done multiple harm and damage, DDoS, blackouts, ransomware from around 2007 forward, wanted by the FBI's really, really malicious threat actors. This is the standalone APT group. And in these current events, on around March and April 2022, around the start of this year, they were targeting bunker Ukraine governments using the Caddy wiper and Matic wipers, which are disk wiper for Windows. They were trying to also attack the energy providers in Ukraine, specific energy provider, in order to shut down electricity, using, again, wipers for Linux and Windows as well, the X-Red family and the Caddy wiper version 2. And they're using also Industry 2 to affect with the ICS protocols, specifically the IEC 104 protocol affecting electrical substations. So they're trying to make it all happen, damaging critical infrastructure and much, much more. And about the Caddy wiper, so the first version of the Caddy wiper, which is a disk wiper, just should erase the disk, it does really interesting things. So the first, it tried to recursively iterate directories. It overrides maximum of 10 megabytes, probably to make it run really faster. It used the write file syscall with zeros, and it also rewrites the partition table, MBR and GPT to zeros, so it will be really hard to recover the drive itself. The second version, which was deployed in the energy provider, which was used further in another Windows machines, used this interesting loader, it's called Argy Patch, and it well, you can see they use also this patch version of IDA Win32 remote debugger, which is really interesting choice, maybe, I don't know, a trolling choice or something like that. And it used it to execute the shellcode itself. We can see that the arguments here, they were using like key and the shellcode path. So the shellcode was encrypted and decrypted inside this binary, and they also added a specific time argument for timing this attack on a specific kind of time as needed. And so this is like up to here about the wiper, the Windows wiper. The Linux wipers are also interesting. They're using either Shred or DD to just wipe the hard drives. They also try to disable the ingoing and outgoing communications and removing like the systemd unit configs to make like the whole operation of recovering it really harder, because you can't like remote connecting to the machine and try to remove the malware. You need to really physically connect to it, because they were removing all the outgoing and ingoing communication before doing the wiping itself. And these are about the wipers. Now about the Indestroyer itself. So the Indestroyer, the timeline of it, we start with, again, the Russia invades Ukraine. Around the end of February, Russia invades Ukraine, and until then, it was assumed that the Sandworm was infiltrating and actually compromised some energy facility with an high voltage substations. So inside that facility, the Sandworm group actually already infiltrated and is assumed to be waiting for the time to attack. So on the 8th of April, we know that the power grid attack was starting by some task scheduling of the Indestroyer 2. There was a task schedule to run it and affect the system, but fortunately they were detecting it and remove the threat immediately. On the 12th, the Ukraine CERT announced that there was the attack. On the 13th, actually the US, along with the FBI, NSA, and stuff, announced also that they were found a new ICS malware, a new IoT malware called PipeDream that was much more generic and also targeting many more kind of devices. Maybe it was the future plan, maybe they didn't really affect it. We don't know any samples of it in the wild, really, as far as we know, that were trying to affect specific kind of machines. Maybe we're trying to use it afterwards, and we don't know. So before we dive in about how the Industry 2, the second version of the Industry, they're trying to damage the electricity, the power stations in Ukraine, well, let's recall the Industry 1. So Industry 1 is responsible, assumed to be responsible in 2016 for the blackout for around an hour in part of the Ukraine capital. And it has this unique ability to speak the IoT protocols of IEC 104, IEC 101, and also OPC OA and stuff like that. It's really interesting IoT vector that really raised the bar and really sets the damage vector and impact, the blast radius can be done with these kind of things. It actually directly controls switches and circuit breakers and protection relays. And one of the most exciting, depend on which side of the map, of course, but like one of the most interesting, I might say, about I'm excited about this attack would be that it was actually using DOS packets to make this system unavailable. So it was DOSing the Siemens protection relays to make them shut down. So whenever the turn on button will be switched, there will probably be some damage occurred because there were no protection relays. They were trying to do this really hard damage into this machine. They were actually using a 0-day in there, as assumed to be by the Senrom group. So we can see on the left picture actually this device after being DOSed. This is the C-Protect Siemens device, and this is the Industry 1. And going a little bit more on the high level side, on the electric grids ops 101, we can see some intro about it and understand how they try to do it. So how the electricity grids and way of operation communication working is that usually there are the SCADA clients. So on the first point, you can see the SCADA clients, the SCADA stations monitoring the RTUs. The RTUs are usually connected to the substations themselves. Each specific substation probably have its own kind of RTUs, the remote terminal units, and these units are connected to the SCADA clients using a router. So why they use a router? Because many times these SCADA clients actually can communicate over TCP/IP, and of course that like IoT devices, these IoT devices are not communicating with TCP/IP. They're communicating with IEC 101. So they use this extension called IEC 104, using the IEC router on the second point here to convert TCP/IP communication into this IEC 104 communication, and therefore the SCADA can communicate with the RTUs. So in respect to the destroyer, they were sitting on the SCADA areas and they could actually control directly the RTUs. So they try to do both to communicate with the RTUs on the first destroyer. On the second destroyer, they were just, as we know, using the SCADA with IEC 104, which is this TCP extension of a IEC 101. Okay, so this was the main core of the RTUs IEC 104 and 101 protocols, but on a higher level, by the amazing paper by Dragos Crash Override, we can see that there are many ways to communicate with these substations. The SCADA clients can actually control multiple kind of devices, PLCs, RTUs, and RTUs with different kind of protocols. The engineering orchestration is usually used to control with over TCP/IP the slave RTUs. But there are also other possibilities attackers can use to attackers, not just attackers, of course, also engineers and the main controllers of these systems. So the OPC server is one way to control the PLCs, and the HMI, which is the monitoring infrastructure that can be used as well to control the RTUs over the IEC 101 protocol. So this is the basic about the electric grids operation. This is our network, kind of a templated network for a station from electric grid station facility maybe would look like. And with that in mind, let's look about their intent. So in the first attempt, the first one in 2016 was assumed to be the following. So they were trying to de-energize the power lines. Then they were trying to deny operator visibility and control. In the new industrial version, they were actually wiping out the hard drive, wiping out computers to make them unavailable to communicate with the devices. Afterwards, they were disabling the protection relays, and they were waiting. So what do I mean by they were waiting? So they were waiting for the operators to turn off the device, because now they want to have the protection relays to help them whenever there is shortages or high voltage scenarios. So whenever the operators will manually turn on the electricity without the protection relays, physical damage would be done, and that's where the original intent in the first one, probably in the second one as well. They want to damage efficiently and effectively these lines to make them disabled for the longest period they could done. And the second version, this is the recent one published in, found out and published in March, in April this year, at these two samples. It was task scheduled for April 8th on the afternoon, and this had this also interesting debug logs. And one cool thing you can see here on the right, you can see that the task scheduling the schema, the XML. We can see that interesting debug logs, and no privilege was required actually, because they were just sending TCP/IP packets over the IEC 104 protocol. So they didn't have any admin privilege or any interesting kind of stuff. You can see here that the run level is also least privilege. So it's really interesting to see that the attackers were really focusing specifically over this effect and damage for the substations. These two samples and overall samples, we're trying to connect to around 11 substations, trying to affect and manipulate them. They were knowing beforehand. You can see here on the left screen, the pickup itself sending the data. On the right, we can see the packets themselves. They were knowing beforehand, specifically the IP addresses, the IDSUs, the IOAs, which are the addresses, the physical addresses, and the current properties of the things they needed. And they knew what they wanted to do. This was a range and sophisticated attack, was targeting specific ranges. They turned on and off the specific switches they wanted, not all off, not all on. They were targeting it specifically. We can see it also here. So for example, in the first sample, we can see for each substation, they know the IP address, the IOIs, the addresses they were targeting, and what they want to do with these IOIs. And again, they were manipulating the system, also using the caddy wipers, the wipers themselves. So they were doing like this movement altogether parallelly of wiping all the hard drives and affecting the substations. So it will be really hard to recover the systems, and the damage will be permanent as they can. That's really astonishing. This really intense, amazing stuff. And also interesting, notable TTPs from this attack is that they were trying to use some new sophisticated ways to manipulate systems. So they were using enumeration of the domains and GPO rules, but hiddenly and silently without admin privilege, using some interesting method with IDSI adapters in PowerShell. They were scheduling attacks without task schedulers in, I think, the new version of the caddy wiper, which is really interesting, probably kind of a timeout or something like that. They had the prepared passwords and the IoT addresses. The initial compromise actually is not really widely known as far as we know for this time, but it seemed to be that they knew the attack vector itself. They knew they had these prepared passwords. They were in the system for many times before that, so they knew all the details. They really did intelligence over the systems before using and attacking them. That's really astonishing. They did this interesting no-mimikatz technique to do credential dumping. They were using this else dump with mini dump, kind of similar to the crash dump kind of thing when something's probably kind of crashing, but they're using kind of different kind of DLL as we see in here. So this is an interesting way to dump the credential. With that in mind, we go to the second story. So this was about the Industry 1, the Industry 2, amazing attack, so many interesting TTPs, and was planned to be highly effective, but unfortunately, it didn't go out as planned. So it was fortunately a good thing, but attack was really threatening and interesting. The second is about the ELF system in Ireland. So the ELF systems in Ireland is composed of the public health system, the HSE. The HSE is the main services of the public health system in Ireland. It has more than 35 hospitals in Ireland, around 70K employees, and it was attacked, really bad by the Conti-ransomware last year. So the high-level attack story starts with, well, as you know it, or might not, but as many of the attacks are with phishing. They were sending an Excel to some employee. The employee opened this phishing spreadsheet, that gave the attacker the ability to connect and control the patient zero, the first system, and to give access to the system, probably with a macro or some proper. One day, I would estimate and assume just a macro or something like that was triggered, but probably it could be one day as well. And from there on, they were later moving the networks using known passwords, leaked passwords, using one day and much more, and eventually deploying the ransomware inside the system. They were doing a lot of noise, and it's really interesting to see how this attack actually evolved. So 19th of May, 2021, the CEO of HC says, we know the attack was happening. We don't know what data has been taken, but we know some data was compromised, and we won't pay. And this is like really kind of not such a good way to deal with that openly, in a sense, because they didn't tell you really nothing. They just say they won't pay anything, and they try to recover it by themselves. So regarding the timeline, one interesting thing to notice in the timeline is, well, first the attackers were in the network, inside of the networks, 8 weeks before really doing the ransomware, really getting to know out of the getting identified. 8 weeks in the system until the real detection happened and the real removal happened, and this is the story itself. So on 18th of March, a phishing email is clicked, and the HSC employee clicks this Excel, and the organization is infiltrated. On the end of March, you can see that the timeline here, so there were around, I think, week or two, and no one got noticed them, anything at all. They were executing Cobalt Strike and Mimikatz, like popular stuff, right? So they're using the antivirus. Well, first of all, let's deal with that. So antivirus, they didn't use, as it seemed to be, modern kind of EDRs, modern kind of XDRs. It seems to be like all kind of ways of protection. And also it detects it, but didn't block it. And why it happened is because, well, the antivirus operated in a monitor mode. Well, amazing. So they execute code structuring cuts, they didn't get block away, and then the attacker continues only to the point where on the 7th of May, they gain the admin privilege, probably with some non-leaked password from dark web password. Again, no one noticed again because AV monitor mode, all good. Attacker continues to do lateral movement, exploit more servers in other hospitals. Sorry. And also, attacker execute cold strike at one hospital, and now the antivirus doesn't work in a monitor mode. It doesn't work in a monitor mode. It detects the cold strike and it tries to quarantine it, and it fails. So we can see here that the attack was not that sophisticated, but more the cybersecurity maturity level was really, really low. So again, we continue. On the 10th, one hospital SOC noticed about this COVID strike alerts. It asked the security provider whether they should be concerned, and the antivirus provider said to them, well, the threat was removed by your systems. The threat was removed in this computer that where the alerts are told, so the risk is low. But it doesn't mean that the virus didn't spread already to another places in the network, right? So they were so focused in this centric approach and didn't thought about the effect widely, and the risk is low. Saying that without all the context and relevant network is astonishing. On the 11th, attacker brute force the passwords, doesn't succeed with brute force the passwords, fails doing that, executes one day, popular one day successfully on the system, and doesn't get noticed at all. So this is another thing that like I'm like, oh my God, because no one noticed it, ignored completely, and it's really, really astonishing to see that. On the 13th, the security provider emailed the HC SOC about many unhandled events since 7th of May, and you know what the SOC team doing? So the SOC team is advised that there are threats in the system, and they just restart the service. They just restarted the service team and restart the service. And I'm like, what the fuck? Sorry for the language. And continues on the 13th, one hospital actually detects the attack, doing the correct thing. It resets all the password, using the IoT, installing DRs, prevents the spread, doing all things correctly. But didn't share this information with all the other hospitals. So other hospitals, virus is still going on and not correctly IR and cleansing is doing for the other hospitals under attack. And unfortunately, on the 13th, the ransomware is executed in all the exploited hospitals altogether. So the ransomware, just to recap about the ransomware itself, so the ransomware is the Conti-ransomware, the new version from the 2021, and it encrypts file parallelly. It has these multi-ways of 32 threads with Cha-Cha-8 symmetric encryption. It uses interesting mechanism to split the workers between the threads themselves. It removes backups, and it also encrypts backups. And we can see examples here for how it removes local backups from the system, from the Vim backups. It also encrypts domain backups if there are existing some backups like that. And it also adds partial encryption features, maybe to get maybe it's a way to avoid detection, or maybe it's the way to do it faster, probably kind of both. It encrypts parallelly with jumps, the files, with 1 megabyte of jumping in between of them. So that's a cool thing. And the impact on the news is really bad. So this is from the site, from the web archive sites of the hospitals themselves. We can see many hospitals got cancellations, CT scan cancellation, MRI cancellation, appointment cancellations. More than 20 hospitals got affected. You see also comments on the web, people waiting for treatments for weeks and months for treatments, and now this cyber attack, and they can't get treated because there's no appointment, no nothing. it's really, really bad. That's really sad story, I believe. So the aftermath of that, more than 20 hospitals got impacted, appointments and IT system got shut down, X-ray machines, CT scans, appointments, and much, much more got shut down because their IT systems, mainly of them, shut down. Interesting to say that maybe attackers got conscience in the middle. I don't know. Maybe they seem they raised really the impact really, really bad, and they demanded initially 19 million dollars, but they gave up and sent the keys. Nonetheless, it was still hard to recover, 3 months to recover. Only by the end of September, the HTC recovered more than 1,000 servers and thousand around 1,000 applications themselves. Really, really bad attack, high impact. The estimated damages, without even paying for the key itself, without even paying for the attackers, was around $600 million estimations out there. Really, really bad because of the recovery, because of the decryption, because you need to clean all the system, to check all the system, because you need to update the system, replacing them. They have this old system called, I think, NIMS, something like that, which is an old kind of hospital kind of related systems that is really hard to update. So really bad again, and the cost of this would have been really high. Also, data leaks, more than 500 internal records was published out there. And yeah, so this was the aftermath. What we can take from this attack? So we can take from this attack is, well, first, configure your security tools. There's so many non-configured security tools, non-updated ones, more than 12 months without any updated antivirus tools, old system, this new system, probably any more kind of 1 2 years before and one day could have worked in the system because they weren't updating. The attack was not that sophisticated, but more that the defenders were not prepared. They have this low cybersecurity maturity in the systems. You know, IT asks every provider a threat removed. They say yes, the risk is low, and they didn't do nothing after that. They don't share the information. They restart the servers as a protection mechanism. Really, really astonishing, really bad. They didn't have ways to prioritize and the standard way to mitigate and to deal with incidents. So attacks will happen. They didn't have a way to mitigate them correctly. Communication, they were lacking communication, sharing data between the hospital, even when the attack and ransomware occurred. So really bad attack, misfortunate, or also mispreparedness and misorganization as well, and many points to be taken from it, and many interesting bullets from here. So our last attack we're going to deal with and we're going to tell about is the Colonial Oil Pipeline Attack. This will be our concluding wise story event. So Colonial is one of the biggest companies from oil transportation, gas transportation. It is one of the biggest pipeline in the east coast of the USA. We can see the pipeline route on the picture on the right. This is the largest pipeline system for refined oil in the US. More than 50% of the fuel consumed in the East Coast is actually arriving through these pipeline systems. And it's really, really important in the aspect of oil and gas from anything. And yeah, it was attacked, and it was attacked really, really bad. So on the 19th of May, the Colonial company shuts down its pipeline, the Colonial pipeline. And why it was doing that? It was doing that because the PCs managed, the Colonial pipeline got attacked by ransomware. They will notice this ransomware was going on, and they were immediately shutting down the system and handling that. Uh, the attacker will probably use the attacker was probably used some unused and old VPN account, a password they found in dark web without multi-factor authentication, without two-factor authentication, really bad. And then also the Biden administration involves in that, and also entering into the picture, helping them. The FBI actually corresponds and managing helping managing the event as well. This is really a nation state kind of thing, really a nation state widely important subject. So they were really trying to help in this course of events. The timeline of this attack was this. Well, it was assumed to be on the 16th of May 2021, and first division probably estimate to be there. Data was stolen. Probably, as I told you, with this leaked dark web password, they were infiltrating the systems. The ransomware starts on the 7th of May. The US government immediately informed, and the pipeline is also taken to minimize the exposure. You would ask yourself, like, shutting down all the pipeline. But remember that at this point, they didn't know if the attackers were actually trying to manipulate and even damage the pipeline itself. They didn't know anything. That's really important point. So I believe that they've been doing correctly, taking down the pipeline to minimize the exposure and the impact and the blast radius of the attack itself. Few hours corresponding and with supervised by the FBI, they were actually paying. So they were paying around $4.4 million, 75 bitcoins to the attackers themselves. And a couple of days later, 5 days later, the pipeline is fully restored. But we can see here that it wasn't restored without any impact, without any damage. Many gas stations were actually impacted. Gas prices went high. We'll talk about it a little bit later in the slides. So regarding the APT group, it's soon to be the dark side group. This APT group is soon to come out from Eastern Europe or Russia. It has this interesting business model, which called RAS, ransomware as a service model, which they operate ransomware services. They will help attackers, cooperate with attackers to deploy the ransomware and take shares, take cuts of the deal itself. They develop also the malware itself. This is the notice they're doing. On the 2021, it was called the dark side ransomware. This year, it's called the black matter ransomware. The change in name is probably more advanced malware, some splitting in this group, but again, this group is really evolved and really doing much damage out there in the world. A little bit reverse engineering this threat. We can see that it tries to delete the backups. Again, it removes all shadow copies from the system. It removes all the backup services. We can see the backup services being queried. We can see there's so many interesting backup services. It tries to remove all of them from the system, and it uses for fast encryption symmetric keys, and what it does is really interesting. It generates random symmetric keys correctly. It encrypts the system with SALSA 20 with the symmetric keys, and afterwards it doesn't need to send any of these keys. It just encrypts all of these keys with the public key embedded in this ransomware, and remove all signs of this key and evidence out there. And this is the square of operation. The impact, again, really high impact. There was a temporary actually fuel shortage. We can see on the left picture around for 5 days. Some areas without gas. We can see on the left picture gas station being rushed by so many cars waiting for gas. More than 70% of the filling station around areas from North Carolina to South Virginia went out of gas. People were buying, like panic buying, more and more buying, which led for shortage, which led for gas prices going up. Highest in these years. On the right picture, we can see a gas station disabled because no gas transmission probably and stuff like that. But wait a second, you mess with the FBI, and there was the point that the FBI got in line, got into involved in the scenario and trying to do its way to dealing with these threat actors. It was really a nation state matter, and as a nation state matter, Biden was threatening also this group, threatening the attackers will be dealt with, and the FBI statement around the 14 was actually a couple of days before on the sorry, a couple of days before that thing was happening. And on the 13th, the dark side group came out to a world where the servers does not exist. The servers, they lost control of the servers, they lost control the money, many of some large portion of this money probably and stuff like that. And it is assumed to be linked in a sense. The FBI took actions to mitigate these threat actors. So the aftermath on the 7th, the FBI actually recovers around $2 million from the attackers themselves. They acquired the private keys for the wallets and decrypt and maintain the private keys. We probably assume to be, we don't know really how they managed to do it, but assumed to be done like that. You can see that they were recovering 64 Bitcoin, but it was almost all the Bitcoins, but the Bitcoin went down, so they actually lost loads of money probably because of that as well. This was on the 7th of June. Also, the dark side server went down and removed completely. I don't know who done it, but great job for doing that. On the 8th of May, there was actually a congressional hearing on the subject with the Colonial Pipeline CEO. We can see here that he's actually admitting we didn't know at the time, we didn't have the answer whether the pipeline was actually changed for days. And typically, it is not something DarkSide does. So they didn't really know. They assumed they didn't change their pipelines, but it could have been much, much worse if they weren't removing the things inside the systems and they didn't disable in the pipeline itself. And as the Joseph Plant, the Colonial Pipeline CEO, said, even the best in class is still suspectable. So lessons we can learn from that attack is that, well, do the basics, clear your unused account, enable two-factor authentication, backups and data guarding. Assume attack will happen. Set up your emergency response plan, IO plans, make all your plans ready for attacks because attack will happen and you want to minimize your attack radius, your blast radius. Look over the legacy entries, legacy systems, old user, old apps, fix and update them, and manage these systems. Get the best out of each expert. Each expert has its own kind of expertise, has its own kind of uniqueness. Raise your skill level and learn from different kind of experts. Again, increase your cybersecurity mature level, educate your personnel, increase your skill personnel, and configure security tools. And this was about the third attack. This concludes our old stories in here. I want to thank you all for this amazing opportunity to speak about these interesting, astonishing attacks. I'm Barak from Wild Pointer. Please, you can follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. And I was really, really excited and interested in giving you this talk. I have so many credits for so many amazing giants and people working to make all information and many information public. Thank you, all these groups, for sharing your knowledge as well. With that in mind, thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much, Barak, for that wonderful talk.
Hello. Okay, so yes, we are live, and if you guys have any question for Barak, I'm sure Barak, are you able to hear us from here?
He's holding the microphone, and you could ask your question live.
Barak, are you able to hear us?
Excuse me?
Can you hear us?
Yes, we
Yes,
can hear you.
I can hear. Yes.
All right, so I'll be opening up the floor for some questions. Although you're not seeing it, we do have a lot of people listening to your talk right now. So, from anyone, does anyone from the audience have questions?
Sorry, please raise the voice a bit.
So again, for anyone who has questions for Barak, do come on stage. Anyone? Are you all good?
All right, I think we're
Sorry, I don't hear.
hearing them, right? So how about this for everybody that are here physically? If you do have questions, Barak's contact details is already on the screen. I hope you don't mind, Barak, but most did be reaching out to you personally for some questions.
Sure, no problem.
All right. Thank you very
You're
much for
welcome.
your time, and we really appreciate you doing this for us.
For sure. Thank you for inviting.
All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye bye.